And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Probably not.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. It's orange!
145. Oh my God! Oh my God!
Decollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You read? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
All right, folks, you know the drill. It's time for another Intrepid Museum virtual Astro Live here. November 24th today. You know, these shows, we tend to stick to the hard-hitting questions, answering the space journalism inquiries that you may have about what actually goes on out there in space. So today we have a very special guest who's going to be answering a question I know is on everybody's mind. Is there bacon in space? And if there is, how do you prepare it? Is there an oven? Is it freeze-dried? Is it made of marshmallows? I don't know, but I will tell you that the exact situation concerning bacon in space will drive whether or not I actually want to go there. And I know a lot of y'all are the same. Gonna have a fantastic show here today, talking with a NASA food scientist who's retired 34 years working on food for astronauts in the space shuttle program and the space station. We'll get to that in just a second, but let me know. Can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay? Is the audio in sync with the video? All that sort of stuff. Remember, these shows don't just make themselves happen. We've got the whole team happening here so that you can watch the show on whatever channel you're watching on. Maybe you're on the museum's Facebook, maybe you're on the museum's YouTube channel, maybe you're on the NSF channel. Any way you slice it, massive thanks. Remember, today's show is actually supported through a NASA cooperative agreement awarded to the New York Space Grant Consortium. So thanks for that. If everything's going well, let's go ahead and hop in and start discussing cosmic cuisine and get to the answers of bacon in space. It is Miss Alicia Seagull. How you doing, Alicia?
Hello, I'm doing great. Very excited for this very timely topic.
We
have Thanksgiving coming up in here in America anyway on Thursday. And we thought, wow, what a perfect thing to be talking about. Of course, food and space. If you are a longtime viewer of our channels, you might remember we actually talked about something similar about 4 years ago, believe it or not.
4 years.
Time for an update. Yeah. But no, this is a really, timely topic, of course, for the holidays. But also as we're looking forward to the Artemis missions, right? Thinking about spending a long time on the moon, spending a long time in space, maybe going to Mars someday, thinking about all of the different things that you have to do to develop food, packaging for food, how little weight it needs to be to get up there, keeping it long term, all of that sort of stuff for the future. So we're really excited to be welcoming on Vickie today to talk to us a little bit about that.
Let's get Vickie over here. Folks, please welcome to the show, Vickie Claris. Vickie, you have been feeding astronauts for a very long time, haven't you?
I have, yes. I started in 1986 or 1985 working as a contractor in the food lab at the Johnson Space Center, and retired fully at the end of 21. So quite a few years working with the space food systems.
Gotcha. And you weren't just on the space shuttle program. You were you're not just like somebody there packaging meals. You were the manager of the food systems for the International Space Station, I think.
Yes, I worked 4 years as a contractor, and then I transitioned over and became the manager, the civil servant manager of the shuttle food system. And I managed shuttle for quite a few years.
Yeah.
In fact, and then started managing space station. I actually overlapped doing both for a few years. And then it really got to be too much. And so they hired another food scientist to manage the end of the shuttle food system. And I just went fully to space station.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
So if there's anybody who knows what there is to eat in space, I think we've got a good guest for the show here today.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably been a few tweaks to the menu since I left, but not a huge amount, I'm sure.
Gotcha. I'm not going to be like, okay, stay tuned for another 15 minutes and then we'll talk about bacon in space. I'm going to hop right in. Is there bacon in space?
Sadly, no.
What? Really? There's no bacon in space?
No bacon in space.
There's not even like freeze-dried bacon or like space bacon, or is there just no bacon flavoring that's added to something?
Well, bacon flavoring, yes, potentially, but no, there's no real bacon. unless they've added it, but I seriously doubt it.
Oh, okay.
Jack's gonna be so disappointed to hear that.
Jack is going to cancel all of his space tickets. I don't know that Jack has booked any space tickets. Why? Why is there no bacon in space? I mean, we package all sorts of stuff in space. There's ice cream in space. There's Thanksgiving dinner in space. Why no bacon?
Well, because, for one thing, you can't prepare it in space because
Right.
they really can't. They don't have anything way to really cook anything up there. I mean, they're basically adding hot water or they're warming it up in the oven.
Right.
But the oven doesn't really get hot enough to cook anything. It's not like it can bake or anything like that. And
Right.
if you tried to send pre-cooked bacon, it would be so fragile that it would just make a lot of crumbs and fall apart and be a big mess, probably.
I would imagine that'd be really dangerous too, with like the grease splattering everywhere, the grease would, make little globules, right? And be floating around. You'd have like painful little bits of oil floating.
Bits of oil.
Most of the astronauts, in order to maintain their flight physical status, they're all pretty healthy eaters. So bacon's not something they really demand.
They don't demand a bunch of bacon. So you said, I'm like thinking through all of the bacon related solutions here, right? And even if you don't cook it there, it's not like they have a griddle in space, right?
No.
They're mostly reconstituting and warming their food. They may add some water back to it. They may warm it up, but it's not like you have a Waffle House grill there and you throw some bacon onto it and it sizzles on the grill. That's not a thing in space, right?
No.
We would have to devise a special bacon cooking oven that somehow like clamps the bacon together from both sides and then controls the grease, like a Space George Foreman grill.
Yeah, you could.
We
It's funny that you mentioned that, though. I did hear a few years ago about there's the hotel that gives you the warm cookies on your pillow or whatever.
Doubletree.
They did cookies. Yeah,
they sent up something to experiment with baking them fresh, and it ended up being a disaster, right? Like they didn't really bake.
So that went up as a payload. That really wasn't part of the food system. It went up kind of as an experiment.
Sure.
And it was kind of like years ago, they had a espresso machine that went up that Italy sent up as a payload.
Right.
And it worked for a while and then it quit working. And one of the astronauts, Italian astronauts that flew later on, he took a bunch of the little modules to put in it. He's determined that he was going to get it working again, but he came back and said, no, it didn't work. But I know they tried bacon cookies, that one, they did send it up and try baking, but it was interesting because NASA wouldn't let them eat them.
Really?
They actually sent up some pre-baked cookies for them to eat
as like a consolation prize. Like you can't have the warm, fresh cookies, but here's some cookies.
Yeah. And the reason they didn't allow them to bake them is because it did go up as a payload and it didn't go through a lot of the food safety stuff that it normally would. They didn't want them to eat them. So officially they didn't eat them, but trust me, if they were cooked and came out right, I'll bet my bank account they got eaten.
I didn't hear any stories about the airlock opening and cookies floating away from the ISS or anything like that. They had to go somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't love cookie dough too, right? Like it doesn't have to be cooked. Eat it, right?
Raw dough on the space station. We're violating all sorts of food science things here. Don't eat raw cookie dough, folks, especially if you're in space.
Oh, God.
I have to
Yeah.
Oh,
say
that's so
that.
interesting.
Yeah, food poisoning in space would not be fun.
No kidding.
No.
So let's talk through this some, right? Technically, and I'm gonna get back into my bacon related ideas. I just don't want to make the entire show about bacon, but we're gonna make bacon in space happen. And Vickie, you just said they tried bacon cookies, and I was like, bacon cookies?
I know.
Oh, baking cookies, not
Hey,
bacon cookies. Okay.
Not CON.
Not bacon, like bacon flavored cookies. All right. Anyways, so in space, it's tough to get food there. Not only does it have to last a long time, right? We don't have fresh flights going up there daily to resupply the station, but it also has to be light. You don't want to take something that has a bunch of tin cans and it's heavy and it takes extra mass on the rocket that takes it up to the space station, right?
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about how we make food last so the astronauts can get a resupply mission a month or every 2 months or something, and then they eat that food for a couple months. And are there fresh vegetables sometimes? And then there's also the longer lasting food. How does their mix of food sort of shake out?
So they do get increments of fresh food. So anytime one of the cargo flights goes up to the ISS, if they have late access to it where they can put some fresh items on there, there's going to be, things like, oranges, apples, the kind of stuff that'll last for a while.
A couple
They'll
days, a
need
week or
fresh
something?
food. Yeah. And actually, they're, it's like Christmas every time they get fresh food. And we had, when shuttles flying, they did not have a way to send up fresh food. And the astronauts demanded what they called the fresh food locker. And it was one of the mid-deck locker trays that they filled at Kennedy, like right before they started fueling the vehicle.
Really?
So the astronauts demanded that they have that, and so we would put things like apples and oranges and stuff like that in there, but it'd also be a preference.
Nope. We may have had a little hiccup there with Vickie's internet. Give us just a second to get Vickie back, y'all. But talking about how we can get fresh food, nope, here we go. I think we got her back. Just a little internet hiccup. Vickie, do we have you?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
I'm here.
I didn't know that when Space Shuttle was first flying, it wasn't like they'd put a banana in a locker or something like that. When it first started flying, they didn't have any fresh fruit aboard.
And was
About the first 4 or 5 missions, they did not.
Was that locker refrigerated then, that they could put the fresh food in it?
No, it wasn't refrigerated. That's why it had to be more stable fresh fruit like oranges and apples that would last at room temperature. Because it wasn't refrigerated. It was just ambient temperature. Yeah. So, so we did that on shuttle, but they also turned it into a preference thing where they wanted to add like their favorite candy or whatever that wasn't part of the menu. Yeah. So, and they would have to it was a big deal. We would have a meeting with the shuttle crew and they would decide as a crew what was going in that fresh food locker.
Did that have anything to do with like shuttle, the first couple flights of shuttle being experimental and then, okay, now it's operational, we need to make this serious and have fresh fruit? Or was that just not in the design requirements for the astronauts' appetites, their nutritional design, I guess, right?
There to begin with, the first 5, the reason it was different food-wise, for one thing, was because they didn't have the galley for the first few missions. So they had what they called a portable water dispenser and a portable heater that was like a suitcase food warmer. And so for the first few shuttle flights, they did not have the galley that they eventually had, the more sophisticated galley that had the rehydration station and the oven built into it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So they sort of hadn't gotten there yet. They were doing, I guess, shorter duration missions, eating the packaged food while they were getting shuttle going. And then once the astronauts are like, hey, this thing is working. If we're going to be going to space for longer periods and doing all these shuttle missions, we're going to need some creature comfort. I can say creature comforts, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fresh apples and oranges are creature comforts, I think.
Yeah,
so
they are.
I like it.
And
I
they
would
love to get it anytime they can on ISS. They love that.
So yeah, I would
Gotcha.
imagine that, because the durations of these missions were so different between shuttle and, ISS. I mean, you're up there all the time. You're getting your resupplies. For the fresh food up there, when it's sent up, then I would assume that you have to eat it pretty quickly
Oh
thereafter.
yeah,
And
pretty
then
quickly.
what happens to, I don't know, like the rinds of the oranges or the banana peels or whatever? How does that not like rot, or is there a smell? Do you put it in a Ziploc bag and just kind of wait to send it back, or?
So they bag all the trash, and the cargo vehicles that go up, like the Progress, the Russian cargo vehicle, and the ones that don't come back, that burn up on reentry, they serve as the giant trash cans in the sky. And
Right.
so, like, the Progress will go up there and it'll stay docked, and gradually they'll offload the good stuff. And as they offload the good stuff, it gets replaced with trash. And before the next Progress comes, it gets jettisoned and it burns up on reentry. So it's the giant trash can in the sky for food trash and any other kind of trash, that they need to get rid of. Clothing.
And for shuttle, then, though, they would just have to bring it back with them, right?
Oh, yeah. Shuttle, it just came back. All the trash came back. It was usually tucked, it was put in bags, and usually it was tucked under the floorboard. They had a space that they, where they could lift and just kind of bury it underneath the floor.
Under the floor.
That's how it came back. I remember once we did for SLS-1, Space Life Sciences 1, the first dedicated life sciences mission. We were still landing in California at that time. And so we were doing that particular mission. They had to weigh and record everything they ate on orbit during that flight. Not all, it was the crew members who were participating in the life sciences experiments. And so when it landed out there in California at Edwards, we had to go through the trash because
really
we wanted to make sure that they had recorded everything that they ate. And so it was interesting because we weren't able to access the trash until a couple of days after it had sat out there on the desert.
Oh,
So
good
you
times.
can imagine what that was like.
I was gonna ask, like, while it's still on the space station, like, imagine you get a fresh banana. I assume that's one of the things they could carry up to the space station and eat within a couple days of getting there.
Usually not bananas, because they go bad so fast.
They really do. Like, if you forget about them for 2 days, they're like, you look over and you're like, wait, was that black last time I saw it?
Sometimes they have little like fruit flies that travel with them that you don't even realize.
Geez.
Can you imagine fruit flies on the ISS? Oh,
No, we haven't had that complaint, so.
gosh.
But okay, something, I guess this is a question. An apple would have an apple core. I'm trying to think of fresh food that would have leftover waste that's like wet
And
leftover
orange
waste.
peels and things like
Orange
that.
peels, yeah.
Sure.
So that goes in the trash. They're not
Right.
trying to like recycle that or anything on the space station. And then it sits in the trash, hopefully sealed until it comes down in a trash can cargo craft, right?
Exactly.
Does the bag inflate as it rots? I don't know if this is a food science question, honestly, but
Well, it depends. It would depend. I guess, yeah, there's going to be some gas production,
yeah.
but I don't think any single bag is going to be have enough food. It's going to be mixed trash probably. So it's probably not going to have enough food in a single bag to actually cause it to explode or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're not talking like pounds and pounds and pounds of wet garbage in a sealed space bag tucked under the floorboard of the spacecraft.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, because so at the Intrepid, we frequently talk about like the history of all of the space program and the history of space food in the program sometimes too. We actually picked up the Gemini 3 capsule, which has attached to it that funny story with the corned beef sandwich. So of course we talk about space food a little bit and the progression of it. And as we mentioned earlier, thinking about things like the packaging, how the aluminum tubes from the Mercury program were heavy, and so they were like, all right, we got to switch that up to these plastic pouches. And how can we reduce the weight? Oh, we won't send it up with the water, we'll make it dehydrated, and then they'll add the water when they they get there. But there were always actually in some of the pictures that we use, these little tablets that they would attach to the plastic pouches that they would put in afterwards to like disinfect it or something. Do they still do something like that with the food pouches?
Not to my knowledge. We did, you're right. On some of I believe Mercury and Gemini had those where it was physically attached to the package and they would put it in there and it would help control odor and stuff. But I don't think that if they do that, it's separate from the food system. I'm not aware of it. I don't think they do.
They just throw one of those little Christmas tree, air freshener things.
An air freshener.
Like, all right.
They like hit it with Febreze and they're good.
Yeah, just a couple squirts, you're good to go.
Okay. I've got a picture here of this is the space shuttle galley, I think, that's come through. And you can see sort of like meal trays. Are these meal trays put together by your team on the ground? Are these the astronauts picking and choosing things out, or how did an astronaut actually put together a meal? Did they open one bag?
I'm having trouble seeing the picture because it's really small, so I'm trying to see what you.
I will enhance it. I'll make it much larger there. It's just sort of like they've got a tray and they've sort of chosen a couple different things.
That actually looks like the shuttle meal tray.
Right.
Okay, so that is from the early part of the shuttle program. So it was a metal tray and it actually had like red rubber gaskets on it to hold the packages in place.
Okay.
In microgravity. And so each crew member got one of those trays. And back then, the package that we had was a white rigid package that was pretty much square on top.
Yep.
Was about, I don't know, maybe 2 inches deep or something like that. Okay, so that was the original, that white package was the original package for the freeze-dried and for the beverages. In the corner of that package, I don't know if you can tell in the picture, but on that package in the corner, there was one side that was kind of blunt. One corner of the package, it wasn't rounded, it was blunt. And in that corner is where the septum was. And the septum is where the septum was contained in that corner.
Right.
It had a slit in it. And that's what allowed the water to be injected into the package using a needle from the galley.
I think I've circled a couple of them there. I think I can see the sort of angled corner that's a little bit different on each one of the packages.
And so when Challenger happened and we were down, early on, the missions were shorter and the number of crew members were smaller. And so as the missions grew in duration and the number of crew members increased, the packaging became an issue because it was taking up way too much room, especially in the trash. And so when Challenger happened and we were down for a while, we were given a project to redesign the packaging. And we came up with a new package for the freeze-dried and a new beverage. And actually, the new package for the beverages, they're still using today. The same one that we developed after Challenger. There has been another generation of the freeze-dried package since then. So we're on about the third generation of Cent shuttle of the freeze-dried package, and we're on the second generation of the beverage package.
Okay. There's one thing. This is a totally random question, but I'm going to move to another part of that same image. This really does look like a bag of tortillas to me.
Yes.
Would that be realistic that there's a bag of tortillas?
Realistic.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I first came to work as a contractor in the lab, I was really hired to do the frozen food system for Space Station Freedom.
Okay.
Which, frozen food never came about and Space Station Freedom never came about. It was going to be an all-us space station.
Yep.
And so pretty quickly, but my other duties as assigned were to support the woman, Rita Rapp, who was the manager of the shuttle food system. And so we had, at that time, we would send up sliced bread, just commercial sliced bread in Ziploc bags for them to make sandwiches with.
Yep.
But then
Really?
we had a payload specialist from Mexico fly, Rudolfo Neri, and he wanted to take corn tortillas in the fresh food locker. And so we said, sure, fine. So we sent some. And when his fellow crew members saw how easy it was to take a tortilla, roll it up, and it was like having a sandwich without having to deal with 2 pieces of bread
Yep.
and all the crumbs. So after that, it was okay, tortillas from now on. But being the good Anglos that most of them were, they wanted flour, not corn.
They wanted flour, not corn.
Yes.
That's really interesting though, because like I said, we tell the corned beef sandwich story and we're always like, oh, and the moral of the story is, you can't have bread in space because it makes crumbs. And that's the reason why they switched to tortillas. But you're saying they actually had slices of bread even further after Gemini. And
Oh yeah.
that was all because of that guy bringing a tortilla up there.
Yeah, and actually
Oh.
they had sandwiches into the end of the shuttle program because that, the whole story about the sandwiches got smuggled on in the pockets of the right, okay. During shuttle, they actually instituted what they called a worn carry-on sandwich. And so what would happen is the night before launch in crew quarters, because part of our job was to support them when they were in quarantine for that week before, we would feed them, but it was just regular food,
Right.
we
Earth
prepared
food.
meals.
Well, a low residue diet, as they say, right?
Well, that was up to the crew members to decide what they wanted to eat. But we would plan a menu, and they would spend about 4 days in crew quarters in Houston, and then they'd fly down to Florida and spend the last 3 days down there. Well, the night before the launch in Florida, they would pack beverages for them, water. Typically it was water. We would put in and have it ready. And the crew that was the Cape Crusaders that went out to the pad, the astronauts that helped their fellow crew members into the vehicle,
Right.
they would take these beverages out there. But there were also sandwiches provided as well. If they wanted a sandwich, they could request it. And so we would make those sandwiches, put them in a cooler, and they would go out to the pad and they would get transferred over and they would get put tied off in a helmet retention bag under the seats in the mid-deck locker, in the mid-deck of the shuttle. And then after launch, that gave them access to food if they wanted it, or quickly, and also to water, because the galley took a little bit of setup. And so they didn't, it wasn't ready to go the minute they got up there. And so they wanted to have, something available. And
Snack,
so,
yeah.
so they did the worn carry-on. And the funny thing was, most of those sandwiches never got eaten on orbit.
Really?
Because a lot of the crew members would say they'd either forget about them when they first got to orbit and they were real busy, or they weren't feeling real well when they first orbit. And so a lot of them ended up in the trash. But by far, the most of them got eaten after a scrub when they were driving back from the launch pad to crew quarters in the astronaut van. They would eat that because of them had skipped. They hadn't eaten much the day of launch because they were worried about being sick when they first got to orbit. And so they were usually starving if there was a scrub, and so most of the just actually got eaten on the Astro van coming back to crew quarters.
What kind of sandwiches were these though? Were they like peanut butter and jelly, or were they like ham and cheese? Like, was it stuff that
legitimate sandwiches?
They
for a while?
So they were legitimate. Yes. We would usually put it would be like ham and cheese. We would put something like mustard on it to help, control, but they were kept refrigerated until they were put on the vehicle,
Yeah, so funny random story. We at the museum used to do a little show where it was called Astronauts Behaving Badly. It's like hijinks of astronauts that they've done, so of course we tell the story about the corned beef sandwich. And so we have a prop. In the morning, we would go to the local bodega and grab a corned beef sandwich, use it as the prop for the show. And there was once that we did it, And after the show, I threw all our props and everything in a bin, whatever, put it away in the office. And I kid you not, 3 weeks later, I'm like, what is that smell? Like, what died down here? What is that? And yeah, I had accidentally left the corned beef sandwich out. It doesn't smell good after a while. So I can only imagine if there was something like that shoved under their seat that they would not appreciate that smell.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a bad day.
Literal story. Like, you think you know everything about Space Shuttle, right? Did you
Right.
know that they kept snacks for scrubs or on orbit in their helmet bag under the seat in the mid-deck? There's always something new to learn, y'all.
Do they still do that? Do you know, like, now currently, like, for the
No, I seriously doubt it on Dragon. I can't answer that for 100% sure.
Sure.
But I know that once we got past shuttle, I'm pretty sure they weren't doing that anymore.
Gotcha.
If they did, they would institute that on Dragon, because I don't think the Russians would have, when we were launching from Russia, I don't think that would have been allowed. Yeah.
not a lot of room on those Soyuz capsules either.
No.
You'd have to carry your sandwich in
Not a
your
lot
lap.
of room on Dragon either. So,
True.
I want to explain a little more about tortillas if I could.
Sure.
So when they first started wanting to fly the flour tortillas, we looked around the launch site and there really weren't any factories that made tortillas.
Ah.
Yeah, most of they just weren't local. I mean, you had to go like towards Miami to find tortillas, right? So, but Houston had plenty. And so we looked around Houston and we got samples from a bunch of different places. And we basically looked for the ones that had the lowest yeast and mold count, because that's how it's going to go bad, right?
Yep.
And so we found one that had really clean numbers. And so what would happen is when the crew was leaving on the NASA jet, when they were leaving crew quarters to go down to Florida for the launch, we would go out that morning, buy tortillas, put them on that plane. They would go to Florida, and that's what flew. And that worked for really most of shuttle. But then towards the end of shuttle, when the flights were really getting longer, beyond 2 weeks and things like that, the tortillas weren't really lasting that well. And so the crew members wanted them for, we want them for the duration of the flight. So we need, tortillas.
Tortilla maker. That's what they need.
Life. Yeah. And so
they want to make it fresh.
They need space grade tortillas. Like,
and so the military had what they call extended shelf life bread products, or ESL bread products.
okay.
They're part of the MREs, the meals ready to eat.
Mhm.
And so there's a company in San Antonio called Sterling Foods that has had that contract for who knows how long,
Right.
all during my career. And so they made extended shelf life breads, but not tortillas. So they made things like dinner rolls and wheat flatbread and things like that. And so, but we knew the technology, the microbiology and the technology involved.
Right.
And you just package it without oxygen, right? And then the yeast and mold can't grow.
Ah.
But there's always a catch. And the catch is you can't just take regular bread dough and put it and do that, because then you run the potential of anaerobic pathogens growing. And some of those are pretty nasty, like Clostridium botulinum, things like that.
Right.
So the way the military prevented that from happening was they put a binder in the dough that bound the free water. So if you get the free water that's available to the microbes below a certain level, nothing can grow, because there's not enough free water. And so you basically add a binder to the dough. And so we knew how to do it. And so we started making our own extended shelf life tortillas. So Food Lab, for several years, we were in the business of, dough divider, dough press, the whole bit. And about the time, and ours got about a 4-month shelf life. and then they would develop this kind of bitter aftertaste. And so when we went into space station, we're like, okay, we're going to need more than 4 months of shelf life. So we were about to start a R&D project to figure out what was causing that bitter aftertaste. And about that time, there was a company that came out with a soft taco kit in the grocery store.
Yep.
And it had the tortillas inside it. And it had a 9-month shelf life. And we're like, that's got to be a low water activity tortilla. It's the only way they could do it. So we got samples, tested it. Sure enough, low water activity tortilla. We found out who was making it for them, bought it from that bakery, and started packaging. So we got out of the tortilla manufacturing business.
Oh my God.
Look, I don't know about y'all, but I'm going to be walking around my grocery store being like, look at that taco kit. That's an extended shelf life, low water activity tortilla right there.
Yeah. And so we, like I said, we got out of the manufacturing business. And then several years ago, the military started with packaging an extended shelf life tortilla.
Right.
And so we got samples of it. And I'm sure with as many Hispanics as are in the military, there was a demand, right? We need some tortillas. So they started doing it, and we got samples of it, and we did a blind taste test to compare ours to theirs. And some of our folks, I mean, we brought the food scientists in, but everybody in the lab, the technicians, everybody tried it. Some of them thought ours was better. Some of them thought the military one was better. Some of them said, can't tell a difference.
Yeah.
Well, when we looked into it, military wasn't making them. They were buying them from the same people we were buying them from.
Brilliant. That's amazing. They probably also had someone in the grocery store like, hey, wait a minute. That's so funny.
Now they just buy them from the military. They don't even have to package them.
Gotcha. Can you imagine being like a tortilla factory in Houston? And then all of a sudden you're like, food safe standards, we were meeting the health department guidelines and stuff. But all of a sudden NASA food science shows up and they're like trying to test your stuff. Yeah. For exactly how much yeast and mold is there in this tortilla. And there's like this shelf growing mold in your tortillas that came from your perfectly good enough for the public, but for astronauts in space.
That's so funny. So, okay, you said that you guys all sat around, trying these tortillas and taste testing and stuff. So is this a job? Like, are there people that just sit there to taste and try out all of the different new foods that you guys package for the astronauts? And do they get to taste the food and pick and everything?
So we did internal sensory, meaning the food scientists, when we were working on a product and we were developing a new product, we would do internal taste tests. But we also had a group of volunteers that worked at NASA who would come in and taste test for us. Because, we had to have unbiased opinions as well, And so, and we wanted people, being food scientists, we're going to be sometimes a lot more critical than other people might be too. And so we wanted just an unbiased group of people to come in. And so we did have a set of volunteers who would come and, we would just put out an email, we're going to have sensory today. You can come, and we had a sensory system set up where they came in and they sat in a little booth and they taste tested whatever, and then they used the computer to score. We had a scoring system, and they made comments and stuff. So it was really just like industry does it for food development, or the military does it as well. Yeah.
Huh. It's good. Like, I wouldn't want to just show up in space and then have to eat whatever's there. Like, it'd be good to know in advance the foods, how they taste, what I prefer, what I don't prefer.
Yeah,
I imagine. Go ahead.
It's go ahead. No, please.
No, I was going to say, I imagine there's only certain things that get packed, right?
Right.
And I bet you some of the favorite meals get chosen soon. And then they run out of this favorite meals, and they're left with the second favorite, a third favorite, a least favorite meals. And so by the end of the mission, I wonder if there's some astronauts that squirrel away one of their favorite meals so they can have something nice for the end of the mission. You don't eat it all at the beginning of the mission.
So the way Shuttle worked, Shuttle was a 100% personal preference menu.
Okay.
So they would come in, they would look at our food list of the products. They would choose what they wanted for breakfast on day one, for lunch, the whole bit. And we would pack exactly what they asked for. And it worked great because the dietitian would also review the menus, but these folks ate so healthy on the ground that when they chose the menu, it met the criteria. I mean, really ever had to say, yeah, you might be taking too much kind of food or whatever. I don't think that ever really came up.
Look, you've got too much bacon on your menu. It's not going to happen.
And the thing was, the shuttle flights were so short that long-term nutrition was not really an issue because the flights were so short. You got to hydrate, you got to eat, but it's not as critical as it is for long duration. Well, we tried to carry that personal preference menu over into space station.
Right.
And it did not work because the food went up on cargo vehicles, not with the crew, and the flights would slip. And they would come back and say, you promised me I was going to get, my food. And part of the time I had to eat somebody else's
food.
And they had terrible tasting food. And so I can remember ESA had a series of unmanned cargo vehicles that they flew early in the space station program. And when the first one was going to go, NASA wanted to load it up with food and clothing. They were concerned it wasn't going to make it. They didn't want any one-off science equipment on it or anything like that. So, and that flight kept slipping because it was a new vehicle. They had technical issues. So we didn't know who was going to be on orbit when it got there. And so we developed, we sat down in the lab, dietitian, food scientists, the dietitian developed what we called a standard menu that basically included all our foods with as much variety as possible. And so we went to the astronaut office. We said, this is what we want to put on that ESA vehicle, since we don't know who's going to be there. And much to my surprise, they came back and said, no, we want you to use this from now on. Because there were so many complaints, it became such a psychological issue about I ate somebody else's food that they said, no, we're done with preference menus. But we did negotiate with them. And really the negotiation was first that we didn't pack it per menu. We pack it what we call pantry style. So all the meats are together, all the vegetables are together. So there's like 8 categories that make up the standard menu. So they're going to have one of those 8 open all the time. And then when they go to eat, they're just going to select, what they want. So even though it's a standard menu, they're not eating per a menu. It's not really as restrictive. Yeah. And then we also agreed to a limited number of preference containers that would be their choice with their name on them. So for a 6-month stay on ISS, they're going to get 9 preference containers of food, and they're going to get 5 of beverages.
Okay.
So it's a total of 14 containers, which is much more manageable to get there at a certain time than the 70 or 80 you would need for a total preference menu. Yeah.
Right. And that's a big change. Instead of a meal tray, like I saw a bunch of chat questions about MREs, you open up an MRE and it's like, here's your meal. It's all the different things in that one meal, and you open it up and there you go. When you pack it pantry style, like you're talking about, it's more like, here are all of your options, and you can pick and choose your meal, and you can sort of vary it. It's not every day you get the mac and cheese. It's also the little apple container or whatever. I made that up, right?
Yeah,
You still get to pick and choose and sort of make a custom meal, which might make it seem a lot more variable, even though you just have a limited number of things that you're choosing. The mixing and matching is really what gets you the apparent variety, I guess you could say.
Yes.
When you say limited number of things, I mean, the standard menu really, though, like how many items are on this standard?
There's about total, last time I checked, a total of about 200 different foods and beverages. So there's 200
different options for them in all of these bins or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. So they could mix and match till the cows come home. I mean, they could create any sort of combinations of food then the whole time they're up.
The thing and the preference gives them a means because we were trying to have as much variety as possible in the menu, you're only going to have a small number of servings of each item. And so if there's something in our standard menu that you really like and you want to eat often, because those 8 containers are being shared with the rest of your crew that's on orbit. And so you're not going to be able, you're not going to have that much option. Like if, for instance, our shrimp cocktail was always incredibly popular. Well, if you wanted to eat shrimp cocktail a lot, you better put some in your preference container because there's not going to be that many servings in the standard menu.
Shrimp cocktail?
Shrimp
in
cocktail
space?
In space. Freeze-dried.
Super sketchy.
The shrimp part of it seems super sketchy, I guess.
Freeze-dried shrimp with a freeze-dried or a dried powder sauce that was tomato base. And the sauce had horseradish in it. So it had a nice little
kick
zip to it, you know? And so very, very popular. During shuttle, it was our most popular item. And that makes a lot of sense on shuttle because when you first go into space, all the fluid shift occurs to the upper part of the body.
You're
congested. It's like having a cold. And so they always said that the kick from the horseradish, it got through the congestion.
It almost like clear your sinuses and it's a stronger flavor. So even though Vickie, you're talking about the fluid shifting around, you go from gravity on Earth, your system is used to working against gravity and pumping the fluid from your feet and your legs and your torso up. Right. And it's fighting gravity this entire time. You go to space, there's no more gravity pulling all the fluids in your body down, but your body is still conditioned to fight against gravity that's no longer there. Right. And so it like makes your head, I'm going to say swell up, get you all stuffy as your body continues to use its normal mechanism of fighting against gravity when there's no gravity to counteract it. And then you can't taste anything, I guess. Right.
Right. It's just like when you and I have a cold. Food doesn't taste the same.
You're
not getting, or it tastes like nothing because you're not getting that aroma through the back of your nose like you normally would.
It's a big part of taste.
Aroma is such a huge part of how our food tastes, So, you can talk about sweet, sour, salty, bitter on the tongue, but that aroma is a huge part of it. And so the shrimp cocktail was incredibly popular during shuttle. And we had one crew member, in fact, who, like when they chose their shuttle menus, if it was a 10-day mission, some of them would choose 10 different menus. But then others would be like, no, 3 days and repeat it, 3, 3, 3.
I like these. I'm going to go with it just over and over again.
One crew member who would pick, he had a 1-day menu that he repeated for however long. And had shrimp cocktail for breakfast, lunch, and dinner on his menu.
Wow.
All shrimp cocktail all the time. That's all I'm going to eat in space.
Well, he had other stuff, but still, he made sure he had that appetizer at every meal.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine as a result, the spicier foods would probably be more popular for them to pick. And there's also like condiments, right?
Oh, yeah. So on shuttle, the condiments were not as easy to work with because we typically use the restaurant's little packages like you get at the fast food joints. So that's kind of messy, But now on space station, because they're up there for so long, they're able to send the plastic squeeze bottles of
like a bigger package or something.
A bigger package. And the plastic squeeze bottles. So hot sauce, very popular. Now, mustard, mayo, all of that, ketchup, all that kind of stuff is available. So they send up a bag of condiments periodically to them on station. And the shrimp cocktail, not necessarily as popular on station. It's still part of the menu, but on station, because they're up there for such a long time, that stuffiness, a lot of it goes away.
Your body adjusts.
Their body equilibrates. In fact, they used to joke about the first thing they had to do was set up the potty because they started eliminating fluid because when it shifted, your thirst mechanism and all that is in the upper part of your body. And so it told them that they had too much fluid.
Ah.
And so, and they would make jokes about having chicken legs because their legs actually got really skinnier.
Well, yeah,
Well,
exercise is important up there. That's a thing.
so the one image we've got up here, it's literally just Heinz mayo and mustard, like in little individual packets, like you get from the fast food restaurant or whatever, right?
That's actually what we used on shuttle. We used
That shuttle.
Yeah, that was shuttle. We actually, the only difference is the salt and pepper. It has to be in liquid form.
Wait,
So,
what?
yes,
Yeah,
it
that's
has
to
to
the
be.
right of that, I think, in the picture too.
Oh.
That's mainly why I have the picture there is because of the salt and pepper.
Is this
So,
the salt and pepper?
yeah,
Makes
in liquid form. So the salt is dissolved in the water. The pepper's dissolved in a food grade oil similar to a cooking oil. And they're in
Really?
dropper bottles. And they have to squeeze it, shake it up, squeeze a drop, and touch it to the food in order to stir it in. Because you can't have that powder floating around because it could get in their eyes, they could breathe it in, it could be a real irritant in microgravity. So it has to be in liquid form.
I had never thought about that. Like salt and pepper. I'm just like, oh yeah, salt and pepper, right? Man, it's just in the food. But you can't have a shaker of salt and like shake salt on your food without gravity. The salt's gonna fly everywhere and ricochet off the food, and it's just not gonna work. It's gonna end up in your eyes, it's gonna end up everywhere. And the same thing with the pepper.
Right.
Huh.
So that's the main difference is the salt and pepper.
No kidding.
Wow.
I was going to say, well, this Heinz mayonnaise isn't going to fly. My wife will not eat it. It's not Duke's mayonnaise, so she would not go to space. She would tell me that. But the salt and pepper over on the side, I didn't even understand. Now, that scent, I guess the oil for the pepper, it comes in, or it came, because this is for shuttle still, it came in the little dispenser. Was the salt just like a salt tablet and then they would add water to it, or it would pack with the water? Like when you ship it?
No, we mixed all that on the ground.
You did that on the ground. Okay.
Dispense it into the bottle. Yeah. But the thing is, it would still, not so much the salt, but the pepper would tend to settle out because even in the oil, it was not very soluble.
Right.
And so they would have to shake it up before they use the pepper because the pepper would tend to settle out even it just would.
Yep, it just said, yeah.
Wasn't totally soluble.
Makes sense. I guess
on space station, like I said, a lot of that congestion goes away over time when they're up there. But they're eating out of packages instead of off of a plate.
Right.
And that interferes with how much aroma they get. And when you heat stuff down here, all the heat rises, the aroma comes with it. When you heat up there, it can dissipate in different directions. So you lose some of the aroma and you're in a closed environment with other competing odors.
Right.
So it's not at all surprising that crew members reported that they felt like their taste buds were somewhat dulled on orbit.
Yeah.
And so that's why condiments, hot sauce was so popular.
Just something to break, to spice it up a little bit. Ha, no pun intended.
And the shrimp cocktail was still popular, but not because they weren't as congested as they were on. So, but I can remember Peggy Whitson, she did not like her shrimp cocktail. She was one of the few.
Really?
But she took it in her preference container because she used it to bribe her fellow.
Bribe people?
Brilliant. That is brilliant.
It's like there's NASA, the NASA view of space shuttle, like astronauts, ISS, and there's like the reality of space. You better take some extra food that you can give to people for favors.
Well, quick question about trading stuff then. So NASA sends up, the NASA approved your food, right? And everything. But it's an international space station. So you also have Russian food, Japanese food. Did they ever trade within agencies? Like did America?
Oh yeah, they trade. So
is that allowed or was that just kind of like a hush hush?
No, it's allowed. It's expected. It's expected. So Russia and the US are really the only two entities that have a dedicated space food facility. The Russians actually have a commercial company that does all their space food. And so
Okay.
when we started partnering with them, they were insistent, we are going to feed our cosmonauts because they wanted to protect that company. It's their business, right?
Right.
And so and that's still the way it is. The cosmonauts, the food is provided to the cosmonauts by the Russians.
Okay.
NASA provides food for everybody else. And so if an ESA astronaut or a JAXA astronaut or Canada or somebody else, if they want to send something from their culture or unique to them,
Yep.
typically what they would do is go out to a commercial company, food company there, and have them either buy something that they already made to send, or they would have them do something custom.
Gotcha.
And then they would ship it to NASA, and NASA would pack it in that crew member's preference containers.
Gotcha.
So as long as it met the shelf life and the microbiological requirements, they could send stuff for us to send for their crew members.
Makes sense.
They do that all the time. And we
Okay.
actually, over the years, there were one or two of the ESA products that they custom we liked so much that we incorporated them into the standard menu.
Nice. Hey, a couple questions are coming through here, and I'm never going to be able to get to all of them, but I have a couple. Let me just address this real quick. Vickie, you retired a couple years ago, right?
Mhm.
So I do see questions about astronauts on the ISS right now, and we're not really, I'm sort of skipping over some of the questions about the astronauts right now on the ISS because you've been out of this game for a couple years, right, Vickie?
Yes, I mean, I
Okay.
can't tell you exactly what they've chosen
Right
now, but
Yep.
I mean, if it's related to Thanksgiving by any chance, or if any of those questions related to Thanksgiving,
That we have some Thanksgiving questions. I just wanted to make sure I said that because I saw more than one person asking that. And so
Yeah.
right now we're talking a wider view of the history of
Right.
space food and concepts and stuff, not like late breaking information about what's
No.
happening on the ISS right now. I just wanted to address that.
Say that.
There's another really good question here, and this is a more serious question. We have a lot of fun with these discussions, but I see in the news about microplastics, right? And eating food that's in microplastics. My wife doesn't let me microwave things that's in a plastic container, use a glass container, et cetera, right?
Right.
And we see so much of this space food that's packaged in plastic.
Yes.
Has there been any concern or study about that? Is that introducing a bunch of microplastics into space astronaut diets, or is that something that's new and hasn't really been studied?
I would say it's new and hasn't really been studied from a space food perspective.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the packaging that we use is obviously food grade. It's all, it's stuff that would be approved for the commercial market.
Right.
It's materials that meet the requirements to interface with food.
Right.
But, a lot of the microplastic issue has come from the microwaving in plastics and the being in the plastic container. So a lot of that has been as a result. That's how it's kind of come to the surface.
Okay.
No, it's really been studied from that regard. No.
Okay. And no microwave on the space station, the question mark at the end of that. It's hot water they add. It's not like you put it in the space microwave and you space microwave it, right?
But the only heat, in the food system, the only heater they have is a conduction oven.
A conduction.
It's got four, and I actually have a picture of it in the stuff I sent you.
I will find it. There it is.
It's got 4 vertical hot plates with clamps on them.
Yep.
And they basically just clamp the package next to the hot plate and it warms up by conduction.
I see.
When we were going to do, like I said, we were going to have a frozen food system initially. And if we had frozen food, we would have had to have a microwave because otherwise it would take too long to heat it up.
Never heat it up. Yeah, with conduction.
Yeah. And so, but what really happened was when the engineers started looking at how much power they were going to get from the solar arrays, they told the ISS program, okay, you guys can either have freezers for science or you can have freezers for food. So we were back to an all shelf stable food system.
Yep.
So the freezers for food went out the window.
Is this a legitimate? Is this a can of Russian beans being heated
Yep.
up in the oven?
Yep. Yep. They do trade food back and forth a lot. Yeah. And so, initially on ISS, the only galley was in the Russian service module. So the Russians provided the service module very early in the assembly of space station, and the service module was an exact duplicate of the service module on Mir. They just built a new one.
They just built another one.
Yeah, and sent it, and that's where all the dining was done. Well, but when the crew size increased so much, they needed a second food preparation, and they put a second galley over in the U.S. segment. And that was a NASA-built galley. And so, early on, all the meals, they all ate in the same place, basically. Now, if they want to have joint meals, they have to kind of plan it. It's like a dinner party, right? Because yeah, they've either all got to go to the service module, or they've all got to come to the U.S. segment to eat. And they'd still do joint meals. The crew always talked about how important that was from, from a crew morale perspective. And yeah.
Well, Vickie, that's how the astronauts coordinate get-togethers. They plan it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw that one coming. But
sorry.
that's a good point, because for holidays, right? For holidays, if they want to come together and have Thanksgiving or have Christmas or whatever, like, they would have to kind of
And so typically when I was there, and I'm sure it's still the same way, when there were holidays coming up, one of the crew members would take one of their preference containers and would fill it with a meal for everybody that was going to be on board.
Right.
So they would create a Thanksgiving.
And I would imagine you have like turkey, and cranberry sauce. And
so the cranberry sauce wasn't part of the regular menu, but it could be sent because it's available. You can even get it in like smaller portions. It doesn't have to be a big can. So yeah. I mean, and we have sliced turkey that's part of the regular menu. It's available all the time. And then we had, like green beans and potatoes and various things that would be part of a lot of people's Thanksgiving meal. So yeah, and same way with Christmas. They do that. Sometimes they'll do that for birthdays. And they'll do, when I was there, they would do both Christmases. They would do, the U.S. Christmas, but then they would also celebrate Orthodox Christmas, which was in January. And so, they would celebrate any excuse for a celebration, right?
Yes. Well, and again, as an international space station, you've got holidays with countries around the world. So why not? And you get to learn about the different cultures at the same time while eating international space food.
I've got another big question here, and I saw this go by in chat a while ago. I can't get to them in real time. So Burger King, right? If you've ever driven by a Burger King and you see the smoke coming out of the top of the fast food restaurant, there's this whole thing about, does Burger King put flavor into their smoke so you smell it outside the restaurant? Is there anything like that, or have you looked at anything like that for space, where, all right, the way you heat up the food and prepare the food doesn't really make a food aroma, so you sort of miss out on that? But is there like a scratch and sniff thing you could open or something so that you get the smell of food, even though it wouldn't naturally come from the food preparation on orbit?
Now, stuff like that is available out there, but I can't say that we have ever. Not during my time, we did not incorporate that into the menu.
Into the thing. It's like there's a little vial on the side of your package, and you put the vial into the scintillator, and it like makes the galley smell like the food you're preparing, even though it doesn't really smell that way.
Well,
it's actually like a luxury that's just a little bit extra weight that they really don't need up there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I would
maybe when we have habitats on Mars or something, they'll have a scintillator 5000. I mean, that's
a good idea for space food.
I'm good. That's my $1 million idea. Just nobody else.
This is my idea. I just had that idea.
But to be fair, there is here on Earth anyway, liquid smoke, right? There is like the scent of, or the taste of liquid whatever, you know what I mean? Like that kind of
Yeah.
char grilled whateverness that you
Mhm.
add to your food.
Well, I guarantee you there's probably a candle out there for several different kinds of food as well.
Yep.
But we shouldn't be lighting candles on the ISS, I would assume.
You
Not allowed.
wouldn't want to do that. Wouldn't
Yeah,
wanna do
yeah.
that.
Real quick, Aiden in chat says this live stream is one of the best I've seen. Aiden, thank you for hanging out with us.
That's
I'm having
nice.
so much fun with the conversation here. It doesn't do the huge numbers like oh the big exciting lunches and stuff, but this is such an interesting conversation, Vickie. Folks, if you're watching, like repost the post we made or whatever, send it to your mom and be like, hey, you should watch this thing where they're talking about food and space. It's really interesting. Y'all can help us get the word out about stuff like this, because sometimes these streams fly under the radar. People don't really know how interesting they are, but this is absolutely fantastic, Vickie. Thank you so much.
So here's something that we kind of touched on earlier, but I know, it's always the big topic everyone wants to talk about. Freeze-dried ice cream.
Oh, geez.
Let's, debunk this once and for all. Let's talk about astronaut ice cream.
Okay. So it is not part of the standard menu and never has been part during, but it has flown. I mean, if I know of at least 2 times during my career that astronauts requested it in fresh food, and typically they did it. I can remember one in particular took it because she was going to do like a video link to some kids in school, and she took it as a prop, basically.
Yeah. She didn't want to destroy their dreams. Like astronaut ice cream. Yeah, it's here in space. Look, it's floating, and it's like floating around.
When you say they requested, just to clarify, do you mean they requested the freeze-dried ice cream that you can buy in tourist gift shops, or like they requested real ice cream?
No, they requested the stuff. Yeah, the stuff that you could buy in the visitor center, and we sent it a couple of times on shuttle. Like I said, I think both times it was used as a prop for video or something. Because adults really don't like it. I mean,
I've heard that.
It's more like hard cotton candy.
It is. It's like Lucky Charms marshmallows. Like.
Yeah. But Backpackers Pantry is one of the big, and they're one of the big producers of it. I don't think they're the only ones that make it. It's the 50th anniversary of that company right now.
Okay.
And when I first started there, we actually bought a lot of Backpackers Pantry products, freeze-dried products, and we would package them and send them to orbit. But we also use the entrees from the MREs. We would buy whatever entrees they were making in the pouches for the soldiers. We would buy those and we would use those. And that worked well on shuttle. But when we went into space station, the commercial freeze-dried foods and the MREs, entrees, way too high in salt. And salt is a huge issue because it can make bone loss worse in microgravity.
Right.
And so for long duration crew members, we had to reduce the sodium. And so that's when we started having to make our own. At first we thought we're going to go to frozen food so we can reduce the sodium because we're going to have frozen stuff. But then when that went away, it's like, okay, we're going to have to start making our own freeze-dried stuff. We're going to have to start making our own thermostabilized, pouch stuff because we've got to get that sodium down.
Gotcha.
So that's when we started doing during my career, that's when we started doing real product development. Prior to that, we hadn't really been doing many custom products at all. Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha. There's so many questions here. I'm just going to try to pull another one out of chat. Chocolate in space. I've seen a couple things about chocolate. Chocolate tends to be kind of dense. I guess it keeps pretty well. Question mark, maybe not from a food science perspective. Is chocolate popular in space?
Oh yeah, chocolate, all kinds of chocolate. Different chocolate candies. All kinds of commercial chocolate has gone up there. In fresh food and in the preference container, fresh food on shuttle, in the preference containers on ISS.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, chocolate's always been very, very popular.
Gotcha.
We have different kinds of M&Ms that are part of the the candy coated M&Ms are really pretty handy because, you know, melts in your mouth, you know, not
in your hand. Yeah.
hands.
Or are we allowed to call them M&Ms, or are we supposed to say that they
Oh,
are candy
candy.
coated?
Yeah. So that started before I got there. That
Yeah.
initially, you know, there was this big aversion to connecting into publicizing anything that was commercial.
Yep.
And so they were called candy coated chocolates and, you know, candy coated peanuts and all
Peanuts
that.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Instead of M&Ms, I don't even see the little M's stamped on it. It's like a little worm logo
Oh,
they
no, no,
stamped on
no,
it. I
no.
made that up.
The M was still there.
The M was still
Yeah.
there.
I have been asked before, did you wash off the little
You had
M's?
to sit there and rub the M's off because no
That's
no
somebody's
commercial
job.
branding for astronauts.
Turn them upside down. They're all W's. What are you
They're all
talking about?
W's. Oh, WW's. What? That looks like a granola bar to me. Like I wonder if that's a granola bar y'all made or like you
Nope.
just
Commercial.
granola
Yeah.
bar I would eat off the shelf.
Yep, it is.
Got the chocolate chips and everything. It's just not labeled that way.
Uh-huh.
Ah, yes.
I have
Another
a quick question about the sorry to interrupt there, but the water that they add to it, is there any is there any like flavor to the water? Is it like a weird like a fuel thing? Like the water that I would just imagine it being in the system, like does it have a taste to it?
So there's a long history there. So NASA uses, and back on shuttle, they used iodine in the water. They used a iodine filter. So the water would pass through a column with iodine, and the iodine would equilibrate with the water. And the iodine was used to prevent microbial growth in the water. Okay.
It's important.
And so, but sadly, sometimes the amount of iodine that got in there was kind of high and they could taste it. And it turned the water a little brown, you know, dark, a little dark.
No
and
thanks.
so the iodine was a problem. But and I mentioned to you earlier, not on the air, that I participated in a chamber test at NASA.
Yeah.
Okay. So all of the water that we were using was being recycled, and it would come back to us in about 3 days. And so just like what happens in the real world, except much shorter duration, you know, you're getting your urine back, whether you recognize it or not. It's just taking a little longer, right? And so when we were in the chamber, they were iodinating, and we were doing blood work the whole time we were in there. We were drawing blood on each other, sending it out because we were doing a lot of different medical experiments. I saw that our thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH levels were rising for all four of us.
Okay.
And so when they started now there's a huge range of normal. And when they started getting to the upper limit, they said the physician for our test said, okay, we need to send in a point of use filter to take out that iodine because the iodine is what was causing the problem.
Okay.
And apparently they saw it in all four of us. And apparently they had seen it in a few shuttle crew members, like they would come back and their TSH values were. So one of the results of that test going forward was they had a point of use filter from then on the shuttle and on station now too, to take that iodine out. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Prior to
iodine, they just have to filter it now.
Yeah. Well, it's just they have a filter that takes it out. It's still there to prevent microbial growth in the storage tank or whatever.
Right.
But then they take it out before they actually consume the water.
There is like a follow-up question when you're developing things from a food science perspective on the ground and you're reconstituting, you're rehydrating the water. Are you using water that's been recycled in the same way that the water on the ISS is used? Or you use fresh water and then up there they're using their recycled water?
Yeah, no, we're just using water, that it's been recycled down here, but yeah.
Right.
But no, it's not exactly the same water. No.
Okay, it's not like there's a special bathroom at Johnson Space Center where it's like, yep, this is what goes into the food lab, so we can make
Yeah,
sure we're
no.
testing the same thing. Okay, not a thing. We have all sorts of bright ideas here, Vickie. That's
That's
probably
right.
not one of them. Another great question. Were there any items that were banned or discouraged?
Yeah. Oh,
for any
there were
reason?
plenty
Like
that we
food-wise.
discouraged.
Okay.
Okay. So we, you know, my best example, and this is in my book too, but my best example is when Pringles came out.
Okay.
So prior to that, nobody had ever asked for potato chips because if they went up in the little bag, they're just going to be pulverized by the
Pulverized.
time they get to orbit.
Potato chip in your
So-
eye.
So when Pringles came out, I can remember a couple of the shuttle guys were like, "Oh, we can take potato chips now," you know? And so we tried to caution them, but a couple of them, you know, we didn't forbid them from taking them, but
Right.
you know, we said, you know, there's a lot of crumbs in that can, whether you realize it or not. There's a lot of crumbs in the bottom of that can. And so a couple of them took them, and then they would come back. Oh, we should have listened to you. That was the biggest mess. And so the rule was on orbit, if you made the mess, you had to clean it up, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so crumbs were just a pain in the neck. I mean, they had, you know, like they had a way to vacuum them up and all that kind of stuff, but it still was a huge hassle. And so, you know, we didn't really, like I said, we didn't forbid them from taking it, but they figured out pretty quickly, and the word got around, yeah, no, Pringles really doesn't work.
It's like this new advance in chip technology, Pringles, the chip in a can, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, that's great.
But you know what's funny?
still.
You mentioned that. I actually just recently saw that Doritos is doing this for Polaris Dawn. They
that's
actually are
right.
setting up
Yeah.
their like the first approved or like chip in space or whatever. I'm really curious what those look like or taste like or what is this new
They're
technology?
probably mushy or greasy or something to make all the chips
Well, I would
like
imagine
adhere.
that they would want to, you know, have some brand integrity and not have mushy Doritos. Like they'd want them to still taste good and like Doritos.
Well, you know, considering that was such a short flight and everything, they probably didn't care the crumbs. I mean, you know, they probably just
Yep.
went with the crumbs. But they were definitely not the first chip up there. I can tell you that. There was chips on the shuttle.
Gotcha. I'm trying to get tons of questions, and there's so many good questions coming from chat. Is Tang still a thing?
Oh yeah, Tang is it's still a thing.
Yeah.
So when I was there, Tang provided to us a lot of flavors that they made for other parts of the world. And so we had many different flavors of Tang in the early shuttle program. There was a factory in Puerto Rico that made a lot of different flavors. But over the years, those all went away. You know, they gradually quit making them because they weren't big sellers. So now we're pretty much down to just plain old orange Tang. Yeah.
Plain old orange Tang. Nice.
But it's still there. And it was always amazing to me because I had more than one reporter who asked me during my career, "So tell me about NASA inventing Tang." And I just had to laugh. It's like,
oh.
okay, you didn't do your homework. No, NASA did not invent Tang.
No kidding. Another question here. I've got an image of some silverware that interestingly includes some scissors, I think, if those are
Right.
scissors that you can use to open your food packages. Do they have like a space dishwasher?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so they do not. So we provide during shuttle and also for ISS, we provide individual utensil kits. So they're not using each other's utensils because
Okay.
they do not have a dishwasher. They do not have a sink. All they have is some antiseptic type wipes to wipe off the utensils after they eat. So they're not totally sterilized like they would be in a dishwasher or something. And
Right.
so that's why we provide separate kits for each person. We really don't want them to share utensils just in case somebody gets sick and, you know, yeah.
Right. But so like utensils, but they have their own set that they use over and over again. It's not
Right.
like you use it once and then throw it in the trash.
Oh, no,
That wouldn't make
no,
any sense.
No, they keep their, yeah, that's why we provide metal ones so that they can reuse them.
Gotcha.
And when we for shuttle, we had an alcohol wipe that we used for that purpose. And we
Okay.
would pack it with the food, and they would have, and they would have the wipes to wipe off their utensils after they ate. And we started the same thing into station. We were using the alcohol wipes. Well, when they started recycling water on the ISS, the ethanol, the alcohol, became a problem.
Oh.
Because it's a pollutant. I mean, it gets in the system and it can't be broken down. And so they had to reduce the amount of ethanol. So I can remember we had a big meeting and they called us all together, all these different people that had ethanol one way or another. And they pointed at us and said, okay, y'all can't use an alcohol wipe anymore. You're going to have to find a different wipe. And we said, okay, no problem. We can come up with something else. But they showed data because they're constantly monitoring the air on station.
Yep.
And so they showed these spikes of ethanol.
Every time somebody opened a little white packet.
Yeah. Interestingly, there was always a spike after a Russian cargo arrived. So
okay.
nobody said anything, but everybody knew there was booze smuggled up on the cargo vehicle.
That's not where I was expecting that to go. Wow, that's funny.
Really? It's like, okay, NASA retired, right? But it's the thing that NASA will never officially say or answer or whatever.
Well,
I've never
so
seen.
NASA's always been opposed to alcohol in space for safety reasons. So, before we were recycling water, it's no, we cannot have it because it's not safe for a person to be drinking. Well, now they have the recycling excuse, so that's even additional excuse.
Right.
But the Russians always had it on mirror. Always. And, I can remember when we first started working with the Russians in the early 90s, we would ask the Russian flight about it. And they were like, "Niet." They would deny that it was there, But I can remember there's one picture of Shannon Lucid. She took a picture of the Russian galley in the service module. And whether she realized it or not, I have no idea. But in the lower left-hand corner of the picture, you can see the butt of 3 alcohol bottles that are stacked, glass bottles that are stacked on the shelf, So, and the crew members would tell us that it was there.
It was there.
And it would get smuggled up on the Progress.
Yep.
So I'm sure they did the same thing to station when they sent stuff to station,
I wonder if they make moonshine up there. I wonder if they're just, distilling their own.
Oh, no.
Well, I think if they could figure out a way to do it, they probably would.
They're astronauts. They're like super talented, right?
I can tell you, okay, this is another story that I probably shouldn't tell. But when we were in the chamber, so before we went into the chamber test, the guy who was going to be the commander of the test that I did, he was real good friends with one of the astronauts, and they contrived this scheme that we were going to brew beer inside the chamber.
Okay.
And we were going to use the recycled water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, he had a medical issue, the commander did, of our test. And so we brought in another crew member, which was good for me because it was going to be 3 guys and me.
Right.
And so the crew member that replaced was a female. So it was 2 and 2. So that was good for me, right? That made it a little bit easier to endure 91 days. But they decided that, we got to go ahead and make the beer as a tribute to the guy that didn't get to go in the test, right?
Wow.
And so we brewed beer and we bottled it right. One of the last days we were in the chamber, we bottled it before we came out. And the bottles were sent in to us through the airlock, and we bottled them. And we use bottles that have like the clamps on the top so that you just could clamp it closed, and it had to be refrigerated immediately, that kind of thing. And after we had a party afterwards, after the test was over, and everybody, we passed out the beer and everybody drank it at the party that we had post-test. So yeah, I mean, this
Was it any good though? Like,
Was it any
wasn't
good?
bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. And the funny thing was, officially they brought in the guy that was replaced commander of the test. Officially, they brought him into the center director's office and scolded him for doing this. But all the managers that were involved with the test, they were all drinking the beer at the party too.
Did they know? They knew that they were drinking
yeah.
beer.
Oh,
It was like, it's like, by the way,
it's funny though, that idea of, getting creative and doing your own things, growing your own things, creating your own things. I'm actually curious, looking long term now towards the future. And I know that in the past they've had a couple of experiments where they've grown plants
Right.
on the
Mhm.
ISS. Chili peppers, I believe,
Yep.
specifically what they were doing, which they loved, of course, because the spiciness and everything.
Right.
We spoke about this just earlier before we started the show about how the Veggie Lab at KSC is really the ones that are doing a lot of that. I had a chance to actually visit it a couple of years ago. It was really fascinating what they're doing with like different colored light waves. The pink ones are good for like certain stages of plant growth, and like
Right.
they're using hydroponics and like oh yes, thank you. They've got like a
It's
clay
Alicia.
substrate instead of soil that they're using, and even just down to the psychological benefits of growing plants, how it kind of
Oh, yeah.
reminds you of home. So I'm curious, like what you well, first of all, from your experience of if you were part of this program while they were trying to grow things on the ISS, but also like long term, what you think is going to be the future of that. How do you think if we go to Mars, how are they going to package things to last for, I don't know, a year in advance, if they have to dump stuff in advance before people get there?
It's
Or
going to be way more than a year.
sure, well, exactly. So like the
yeah.
packaging of that, how to make sure it's still safe long term, how people, if they're going to Mars, to how to keep that food, safe along the way with them. What are your thoughts on that sort of thing?
Okay, so they do have a veggie unit on ISS, and they do grow stuff, like you say, peppers they've grown, lettuce they've grown, cherry tomatoes. It's basically pick and eat stuff because they don't really have a way to, process it or anything.
Right.
So, and it's going to have to be a part of a mission to Mars. So the whole problem with a Mars food system is, so you're going to have to pre-position, just like look at the movie The Martian, all the stuff was waiting for them, right? So they can't take it all with them. So you're going to have to pre-position the food. And right now with propulsion, it takes about 6 months or so to get to Mars. And then you got to wait 24, 26 months for Earth and Mars to get close together again before you can do another launch.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's going to take longer. So by the time you prepare food, you put it on a vehicle, you send it to Mars, you confirm that it's there, you wait long enough so that you launch the crew. And, you got to wait the 20 whatever months. Then you launch the crew, they get there. They have to stay the 20 something months at least before they can come home. And so what they eat on that return trip is probably going to be between 5 and 7 years old.
Yeah.
More
Jeez.
than likely. And that 5 to 7 window is going to depend on whether they pre-position with a chemical rocket or a solar rocket. The solar powered would be a slow boat to Mars.
Yep.
So we can make food from a microbiological perspective that's safe to last for 4 years, 5 years, even longer. But because by controlling the moisture in the food or controlling the microbes in the food, you can extend the shelf life and prevent microbial growth. What you
Gotcha.
cannot stop is the chemical changes that occur in the food.
Uh,
So over time, the color's going to degrade, the texture's going to degrade, the flavor's going to degrade. So the quality, is going to go down. in a big way. And some of the nutrients, not all, but some of the nutrients are going to degrade as well. And so the challenge is how to have high quality, highly nutritional food for that return trip home. That's the really big challenge. You can't depend, obviously, on a refrigerated or frozen system. If it dies, die. No. But what we can potentially, what NASA can potentially think about doing is you can chill the shelf-stable food. And if you do that, that slows down the chemical reactions in the food. So that'll make it last longer, make the high quality, high nutrition last longer. And if your chilling or refrigeration fails, you still have food that's edible. You know, you're not going to starve to death. Right. So that's probably the way it's going to have to go. They'll definitely want to grow stuff in transit both ways. And if they can have enough infrastructure that when they get to Mars, they can transfer something off the vehicle so that they can grow something, that would be great. But volume wise, it's probably going to be so small that it's going to be more of a psychological thing than it's actually going to be a significant nutritional thing.
It's like the little desktop garden that we have in my kitchen downstairs. It like grows 3 little cherry tomatoes, but it's like, yeah, we grew those tomatoes. They're right there. It's not really that much food, but we feel good about it.
I almost wonder though, like, I don't even like it'd be a psychological feat to stomach this, but I feel like, I don't know if somehow NASA created these little like capsules or something. And it's just like you just eat one a day. This is all your nutrients. This is all the calories you need. You know, it's a capsule, it's a powder, whatever. You know, it's psychologically like we're used to eating food. You know,
and your system actually needs food.
Yeah,
I mean, your body actually, you know, your digestive system. I mean, it expects you to be healthy. You've got to have a certain amount of real food, not just taking stuff orally. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, you know, that vitamins and or supplements are going to be part of the solution, but you know, to function healthily, you've got to have real food as well. Yeah,
I'm not looking forward to eating like algae glop or something like that on the way to Mars. Like, I don't want to live like they did in the Matrix or whatever.
You know, it's really funny because during my career, I can remember, especially during shuttle, I was contacted by different companies. Oh, y'all really need to be doing algae-based stuff. And I wanted to say, yeah, you know, I understand how nutritious it is and everything, but these are people who have food preferences. And you know what? They're not going to eat this stuff.
What about like the Willy Wonka gum that, you know, goes through all the different courses for you? Happy medium, maybe.
It's like the bacon flavored algae. It's like we've designed a bacon flavored algae.
Yeah, which you probably pretty easily could. Yeah, yeah, it would be possible. But I mean, people, you know, I think they're still in the test pilot mentality that, oh, you can tell them to do this and they'll do whatever you tell them and they'll be happy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Gosh. Folks, Vickie, we're 5 minutes over time now. We've gone 95 minutes. We were supposed to do a 90-minute show. I want to be respectful of your time, but we haven't even talked about your book. Like, we have sat here for an hour and a half listening to so many fantastic stories. We could sit for another hour and a half probably and listen to stories. You've got more stories in your book, don't you?
I do. You know, quite a bit of what you've heard today is in the book.
Yep.
And I wrote the book. I actually got the idea to write a book in the fall of 19 when my first boss at NASA, my mentor, passed away. I thought it'd be nice to write a book and dedicate it to him. Well, then here comes the COVID lockdown in early 20. And I thought, if I'm ever going to do it, now's the time to do it, you know?
Right.
So I wrote about 90% of it during the COVID lockdown. And I was on the board of directors of my professional org. And so as we came out, you know, as vaccines became available and we started doing things again, I got real busy. So it took me till the end of 22 to finish the other 10%, and then spent most of 23 editing. And so it actually came out in December of last year, and it's called Space Bites.
Yep.
Reflections of a NASA food scientist. And so it talks about the food that we use on station, the different kinds. So there's technical stuff in there, but mostly it's anecdotes about my career.
Nice.
And I also wrote it to make students aware of food science as a career path. I mean, a lot of people know about culinary, a lot of students know about being a chef, and they know about nutrition and being a dietitian, but not a lot really know about food science. And food science is, these are the people that work in the food industry and develop new products and work on food safety and work for USDA and FDA. So there's a lot of good paying careers out there in food science. And I just stumbled onto it when I was a microbiology major in college. When I was a senior, I just stumbled onto food science, didn't know about it. So I wanted to make students aware, and also to make people aware in general that there's more to NASA than just engineers and astronauts, that it takes all kinds of expertise to pull off a successful space mission. So any proceeds that I get from the book are going to go to food science scholarships. So.
Gotcha. And speaking of which, y'all, I put the link in chat a few times. I'm going to do it as well. It's available a few different places, but the link that I put in chat is direct from the publisher Ballast Books. And you know how it goes, like books that are other places, they take their cut, et cetera, et cetera. The best way to support what Vickie does is to get it straight from the publisher on the link that I put in chat there. Ballast Books.
You take the proceeds and you have scholarships for it, right?
That's the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a scholarship established at my alma mater, Texas A&M, in the food science department. But then I also fund some scholarships through the Institute of Food Technologists, IFT, which is the professional organization for food science. Yeah.
Gotcha. So if one day you want to go to space and you want there to be bacon in space, you need to purchase this book so that we can train new food scientists, so that we can figure out how to get bacon in space. And the entire show is full circle.
That's right.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
By buying this book through the website.
Vickie, thank you so much.
Oh, this has been great fun. With us. I've really enjoyed this.
You are welcome back here on the show anytime. I imagine we've barely scratched the surface of the stories that you can tell us. Thank you so much for asking our questions, chat. I know I couldn't get through all of the questions. I tried to pick and choose as many as I could and speed run a couple of them there. But over an hour and a half just learning about all the cool stuff there is to learn, some of the cool stuff there is to learn about food in space. Vickie Claris, thank you so much for being on the show here today.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Invite me and I'll come back anytime you're interested.
Absolutely. Folks, you know the drill. These are Intrepid Museum shows. It's Astro Live. We do them once a month. This was this month's Preparing Meals in Microgravity. Alicia, we've got one coming up next month too, don't we?
Oh, yes. And actually, we are featuring another author, believe it or not. This is a former NASA astronaut, Charlie Camarda. He flew on STS-114, the return to flight mission after Columbia. He also just released a book a few days ago, actually, called Mission Out of Control. And it discusses his experience post the Columbia accident and how he kind of helped to reimagine the safety culture at NASA, which has really been at the core of his work ever since. He's worked with a bunch of other high-risk organizations to do, just do better, really, to prevent tragedy. So we're looking forward to welcoming him onto the show. He's going to talk about his insights behind the scenes at NASA during that time. A really interesting, challenging time at NASA, really, and to discuss how they are currently mitigating risk looking forward to the Artemis missions as well. So if you find out more about that, you can just visit our website, intrepidmuseum.org, or check out our Eventbrite page. And we'll see you December 15th for that.
Yep, that's December 15th, and that's going to be a virtual show, right?
It's another virtual show.
We'll be here online. Excellent. And y'all, remember, you know the drill. The Astro Lives are supported through a NASA cooperative agreement awarded to the New York Space Grant Consortium. It's how we keep these shows going here. Also, nonprofit there at the museum. I think there's been a little bit of fundraising going on during the show today as well. So folks who have promoted and supported what we do here, thank you for letting us do this. I know it's not the hugest viewership we get from some of the starships launching in this or the other, but these are cool stories. And if you enjoyed this, share the link here with other people. Get the book. Hey, it's still in time for Christmas. Like, order a copy of the book and give copies of the book to friends that might enjoy it as well. Let's get the gang all back together real quick here, Kevin. And Vickie, say thank you one more time for spending time with us here on your Sunday afternoon. It really was a pleasure. We may have caught her in a handoff here. Of course we did. It is, there we go. Now we've got her back. Vickie, it was perfect timing. Thank you so much for being here today.
Sure. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Folks, you can watch this again. You can send the link to the other people, but that's going to be the end of our show today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for asking all the cool questions. Sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but for now, that's going to be the end of our show today, and we will see you nerds later. Thanks for watching, y'all.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Say again, SPD off. Off. It's orange! Orange 45! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! What is it? Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.